Marijuana has been the most debated substance in the last century. Some people praise it for its medicinal purposes, others demonize it for its potential to jeopardize public health. When we think of the stereotypical stoner, what's the typical character that comes to mind? Probably an unmotivated pizza delivery driver or a teen with bad grades. But these are not the defining characteristics of a marijuana user. In fact, some of the most successful people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates have partaken in marijuana use. The issue is not marijuana, it is the stigma surrounding the substance that gives it its bad reputation. I'm Nathan Ford, and today we're going to discuss why marijuana needs to be legal on the federal level. I'll examine three main points. First, I'll begin by explaining the economic benefits of marijuana legalization. Second, I'll explain some of the scientific factors that play into the legalization of marijuana. And finally, I'll discuss some of the political factors that play into marijuana legislation. Let's start with the numbers. How does marijuana affect the economy? Well, marijuana can affect the economy in a few major ways. The cannabis industry in the US is worth approximately $30 to $40 billion as of 2024. In addition, the illegal sale of marijuana promotes the staggering number to a mind-boggling $100 billion. According to the Marijuana Revenue and Regulation Act, marijuana as a Schedule I drug falls into Internal Revenue Code of Section 280E, meaning marijuana businesses are not eligible for tax write-offs and can face an effective annual income tax rate of upwards of 80%. This means the government will profit more than the actual entrepreneur taking on the financial risk. Marijuana as a Schedule III substance removes this heavy tax burden on entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry. The government can continue to generate from the cannabis industry while protecting marijuana businesses by imposing a sales tax on marijuana products instead of imposing a heavy annual income taxes on these legitimate businesses. Federal legalization also brings increased job opportunities to the United States. People need to cultivate, manufacture, and sell marijuana and hemp products, which would in turn give people work in the increasingly shrinking job market. Currently, marijuana companies trade over the counter. Over-the-counter trading can lead investors astray because it's less liquid than stock exchanges, it's associated with higher risks, and can incur higher transaction costs, among other drawbacks. Federal legalization would allow for marijuana enterprises to become publicly traded companies in the U.S. major stock exchange, creating increased opportunities for stakeholders. Moving on, let's now discuss some of the scientific factors that play into federal legalization. Cannabis-related compounds are synthetic compounds made in a laboratory and used for medicinal purposes. The FDA has approved cannabis-related compounds for legitimate medical use, but because of dual sovereignty, residents in 10 U.S. states cannot legally access these federally approved medicines. The FDA has not approved cannabis-derived compounds, which is marijuana in its smokable variant. However, 40 states disagree with the FDA, allowing for the purchase of smokable weed with a marijuana card. It's a legislative nightmare. It should also be noted that marijuana has been a common treatment for chronic pain since before 2900 BC. That was before the FDA was even founded, even thought of. Indoor cannabis cultivation can have negative impacts on the environment. According to Quinn and Summers at the University of Colorado, lights, air conditioners, and heaters account for 11 to 25% of a marijuana facility's CO2 emissions. This equates to burning 7 to 16 gallons of gasoline per ounce of cannabis grown indoors. And that's according to the Smithsonian magazine published March 12, 2021. If marijuana legalization happens, limitations must be written into law about how much a cannabis company can grow indoors. Let's now discuss some of the political, legislative, and social aspects related to the federal legalization of cannabis. Allow me to start this segment off by saying, although I personally disagree with some of the decisions Trump has made in office, the Trump administration has begun taking the steps in the right direction by rescheduling marijuana to Schedule III. Marijuana logistically does not fit as a Schedule I substance. The DEA's definition of a Schedule I substance is this: drugs with no currently accepted medical use and high potential for abuse. The FDA has approved cannabis-related compounds, and its potential for abuse is far less than that of other Schedule I drugs, like LSD and heroin. With legalization, interstate marijuana smugglers will almost completely perish. However, this does not completely eliminate drug smuggling as a whole. There's always bound to be a sketchy guy in an alleyway looking to sling dope to teenagers. Now that we're on the topic of marijuana criminalization, we should discuss why marijuana is illegal in the first place. Marijuana prohibition and criminalization have a severely racist history. According to a law review published at the University of Chicago, Alessandro Clark Ansani mentions how marijuana was first criminalized in a response to Mexican immigrants bringing cannabis culture to the United States. This led to a rabbit hole of nativism and reform until the drug was eventually made illegal in 1937. Dual sovereignty does not work because if a state chooses to ban marijuana, its citizens are no longer eligible to use these federally approved medicines. There's also the logistical factor. You could go down I-90 for 30 minutes and forget you have pot in the trunk, and now you're facing a potential felony. After viewing how Americans initially responded to the growth of cannabis use after Mexican immigration rose, let's see how the people view the substance today. Well, a range of polls claim 64 to 88% of Americans agree with the federal legalization of marijuana. There is not a single demographic among all demographics where the percentage of approval is less than 50%. 57% support among those 55 and older, 68 for those ages 35 to 54, and 72% support from 18 to 34-year-olds. Federal legalization also has bipartisan support as well. 87% of Democrats, 70% of independent voters, and 55% of Republicans support legal cannabis. Today, I laid out the various reasons why marijuana should be legalized. First, I explained the benefits to the economy federal legalization would have. Second, I discussed the science behind the newly Schedule III substance. And finally, I mentioned the politics and the near-long century debate of marijuana legalization. Even if you don't personally use marijuana, it's impossible to deny the numerous benefits of safe legal access to legal marijuana for adults. Partake in pro-marijuana protests, sign petitions, do anything you can in your power to fight the good fight. Thank you all for your comprehension today. Thank you.
That's good, son.